We are continuing to discuss reducing the error in our measurement tools. And so in our previous video, we were looking at reliability, and in this video, we're going to look at validity. So just to recap, our reliability is the degree to which our measurement tools are free from random error. So we're looking for consistent data. And we can measure reliability using either a test-retest, which uses the same measurement tool and the same people or participant to see if we get the same results, like measuring someone on a scale and seeing if the scale gives their same weight. There is also the equivalent form reliability, which takes like 2 surveys, has a person take them, say 2 weeks apart, does it get the same results? So we have 2 different measurement tools and the same person. Are we getting consistent data? And then the third measurement was internal consistency reliability, which is if we have different people use the same measurement instrument, do we see a difference? So, for example, if we have a multiple choice question test and we look at if they answered every other question, if they answered the first half, would they get the same grade as if they completed the entire test? So internal consistency, how difficult are the questions within a research tool? Do they give us the same type of results? Well, now we're looking at validity. So when it comes to validity, validity is the degree to which what the researcher was trying to measure was actually measured. Okay. So whereas the previous reliability looked at whether we got consistent data, validity looks at did we actually get what we were trying to get. So we design a tool with an intention to inform organizations' decisions. Did we really get what we intended? So let's look first at this example here. What is your age? 0 to 18, 40 to 64, 65 to 100. All right. Does this question measure what it's supposed to measure? Well, the problem is that if you are between the ages of 19 and 39, it's not going to capture you. So it doesn't measure what we intended it to measure, which is your age, because if you happen to fall in that hole, you're not going to get measured. And then the other thing is the ages and the ranges that we have here, is that actually going to inform some decisions? So we would want to choose ranges for our age that we can actually act upon. So if we could do something different with those who are between 0 and 18 versus 40 and 64 versus 65 and 100, then those ranges are okay. But if we actually need more detail in order to act upon, or we're asking for too much detail that there really is no difference in how we would change our behavior, then what we're doing is not valid. So the first type of validity is face validity. It's the weakest form of validity. When we do rough drafts of our questionnaires, when we create our surveys, we want to have other people, other researchers test it out. So we do a bit of a pilot to make sure that what we are intending to measure, we are actually measuring, that we have covered all the different possible groups that might be, and that the scales, the way we've worded the questions, are going to help us measure what we intended to measure and make sure that it allows us to actually create actions for our organization. The second type of validity is content validity. This is where we look at the representativeness or sampling adequacy of the content of the measurement instrument. So what is it that the question was supposed to measure? So representativeness, or sampling adequacy of the content of the measurement instrument. So we could, for example, use focus groups prior to developing our survey tool to make sure that the terminology we need is there, that all the ideas or options are there. So for example, let's suppose a Shoppers Drug has hired you to measure its image. Well, you say, okay, well, is it a modern building or an old building? Is it beautiful landscaping or poor landscaping? Is it a clean parking lot or a dirty parking lot? Attractive signs, unattractive signs. We are assuming here that that external building is everything that defines Shoppers Drug's image as an organization. And it's not, probably, right? Because what do people care about? They care about customer service. They care about variety of goods. They care about access. So it's not just about how the building looks on the outside that creates the image of a company. And so if we aren't quite sure what all is included in the image of an organization, the thing we could do first was have a focus group that says, okay, describe to us Shoppers Drug. When you hear Shoppers Drug, what does that mean to you? And then we have our participants in our focus group creating the language that later becomes the questions in our survey. Do you strongly agree that they have variety, that they provide customer service? Because those are the things that came to people's minds when we asked them about Shoppers Drug as an organization. So content validity, we can increase the validity of our test instrument by doing some of those focus groups or exploratory research ahead of time to make sure all the options we give them represent what they're looking for. Because if we're trying to get to the image of the organization and this is not how people define the image, then we have a problem with our research tool. The next type of validity is criterion validity. So this is the degree to which a measurement instrument really just want to write tool since that's a much shorter word. Degree to which a measurement instrument can predict a variable that is designated a criterion. All right, so here we're really looking at the relationship between questions. This is whether or not we need to ask about certain things or whether asking about one tells us about the other. So it's used to determine whether other variables of interest need to be included in our research instrument, or by finding out one, you've learned about the other. So then we're looking at two types of validity: predictive validity and concurrent validity. Predictive validity is the ability to forecast a future level of the criterion variable. Okay. Whereas concurrent validity is the ability to predict another variable of interest. Okay. All right, what does all this mean? Okay, let's give an example. Gotta find my cursor here. Okay. So we ask a question. How much do you know about the candidate? Nothing, very little, sufficient, a lot. Okay. We can ask questions like, how much have you been influenced by advertisements on a scale of 0 to 4? Not at all, strongly influenced, common ideology, party identification. So predictive validity, right? We're looking at being able to forecast a future level from that criterion. So are people who know a lot about the candidate, are they likely to vote in the election? The reason we would put this question here into this survey is only if we had predictive validity. That is, We want to ultimately be able to predict who is going to be elected. That's our end goal. And so why even ask a question in the survey about how much you know about the candidates unless we know that there is a correlation between knowledge and who votes? So as we're deciding which questions to actually put in the survey, we don't want to ask questions that don't add value. We want to ask questions that enable us to make change, right? To answer questions, to resolve issues within the organization. So just being good to know is not sufficient for being included in the survey. We only include things in the survey that actually help us in terms of that management decision problem. Now, that's predictive validity. We put it in there because it's going to help us, because there is this relationship between how much the candidate knows and whether or not they're likely to vote. So then we have concurrent validity, which looks at, are people who are influenced by advertisements more likely to know about the candidate? So here we have two questions. How much do you know about the candidate? And how much have you been influenced by advertisements? So here in the survey tool itself, we will take the answers to those two questions and see if there is a correlation. So that is concurrent validity because they're both in the survey at the same time. That's what concurrent means, at the same time. So we're going to collect the information from those two questions to see if there is that relationship, because if there is that relationship, then we can use ads to change people's knowledge about the candidates. That's the concurrent validity. And then because we already know that knowledge about the candidates makes them more likely to vote, we could then predict what's going to happen in the election. So you can see here concurrent validity is within the instrument itself, and predictive validity is tied to the actions we are going to take from the results of the survey. The key here is that as we are designing this tool, we only want to ask questions that actually impact ultimately the decisions that the organization is going to make. We only want to ask questions that have added value. All right, so we've looked at criterion related validity. We've looked at content validity. We have looked at face validity. So face validity being the weakest form. Is our question an okay question? Are we missing things? We've looked at content validity. So a little bit stronger than that face value one here to make sure it represents the answers that the participants are looking for to give. And then our criterion related validity, we had two, predictive and concurrent, to make sure those questions actually add value to the business decision. Okay, so we've looked at those. So then we're going to look here at construct validity. So construct validity is the degree to which the measurement instrument represents and logically connects via some underlying theory the observed phenomenon. I really hate academic definitions, are so terrible. The observed phenomenon to the construct. Like, what does that jumble of words really mean? The degree to which the measurement instrument represents and logically connects via some underlying theory the observed phenomenon to the construct. What does all this mean? Does their response match their actions? That's what we're talking about. So we ask people about attitudes. Our surveys are about how they feel. We do that because we can't do observational research to get to their feelings. But ultimately, why do you care about their attitudes and their feelings? Because those attitudes or feelings lead to some kind of actions. It causes them to do things, not do things. So the reason that we care and we ask them about their opinions is because their opinions match their actions. So response matches actions. Well, asking them about their opinions is only worthwhile if that will then predict their behavior. So we can test using construct validity. If people say they feel certain ways, how does that match their behavior? And so we're tying together that descriptive research method, the descriptive research design, so survey research method, with observational research method, tying the two together. There's something called a purchase intent scale we'll look at in a video coming up. And the benefit of the purchase intent scale is that we ask them how likely they are to purchase something, so their intent to purchase. And then that is tied to studies, observational research studies, on whether or not people actually make purchases. And so we can use this question design to then translate people's feelings into their actions. If they responded a certain way to the question, then what's the probability they actually act? And depending on where they are on the scale, will determine the probability that they actually act. So we can convert this into actually predicting how many people will actually buy a product. That's that construct validity. We're tying these questions about opinions to actual action by tying the surveys to observational research. Does the response match their actions? All right, wrapping up our discussion on validity, we have convergent and discriminant validity. All right, convergent validity is the correlation. Remember how much one moves, does the other one move in the same direction or a different direction? Correlation among measurements that are supposed to measure the same construct. Okay, so if we have two questions that are supposed to measure the same thing, are we getting the same type of responses? Discriminant validity is correlation among measurements that are supposed to measure different things. Different constructs. All right, so suppose we have two measurements of how drunk someone is. Okay, so one is a breathalyzer test and one is having them walk a line. There should be convergent validity. They are both set to measure whether or not someone is drunk. And if the breathalyzer says you're drunk, then walking the straight line should also say you're drunk. These are supposed to measure the same construct, drunkenness, so they should be giving us the same results. That's convergent validity. Okay, discriminant validity is where we are measuring different constructs, so we should get opposite results. So we might have questions that are measuring the opposite thing, so we should get the complete opposite results, right? Suppose you want to survey non-customers to see how big the potential market share could be and why they're not currently buying from you. So the underlying theory is people who shop at discount stores are not concerned with brand loyalty and are self-confident. So the theory says that people who are brand loyal are also self-confident. So what we're looking at here in terms of that convergent validity is that people who have a high self-confidence should have a high brand loyalty. Okay, those should move together. They should be measuring the same thing here. Discriminant validity, people who state that they are brand loyal should also be the ones who are not buying at the discount store. So they should be the opposite based on the underlying theory that we have. So we look at what is that underlying theory. Here, it's a lot of assumptions about who shops. In the previous example, it was assumptions about what the tools measure. Okay, and so we need to look at what is the underlying theory and then do all of the questions, the measurement tools that our theory says are tied together, move in the same direction. Do they? So here we have convergent validity, and then all of the tools that are measuring opposite things are not related. Is that what we're seeing as well? So this will indicate there's either an issue with the tool itself or with the underlying theory if we don't have our convergent and discriminant validity. Now, when we are building a measurement tool, whether we're building an experiment or whether we're building a survey, we need things to be reliable and we need things to be valid. In order for something to be valid, it must first be reliable. So the image that you see on the left is not reliable or valid. So remember, reliable, if we did this multiple times, we get the same results. Well, we're all over the place on this, okay? And valid is it measuring what we want it to measure? So if something is valid, then we should be getting right on to that center bullet, our bullseye. We're measuring what we want, we're getting at our target, we would be right in the center of the bullseye. If something is reliable, then repeatedly we're getting the same results. But you can have something that is reliable but not valid. That would be the middle one. Notice that all of the dots are very closely clumped together. We are getting consistent data. We keep hitting the same spot, but it's not valid because it's not getting us what our end goal is, which is to be in the center. So we want to make sure as we build a research tool that it is both reliable and valid. We want to have the repeated results, right? If we measure this multiple times, we get the same thing, but we also want it to be useful, which means it's got to get us what we need to make decisions.